Good. How are you? Is that a foldable light?
Oh my!
I didn't see this in the program, but we have Bob Fatrakis, who knows more about not just specific stolen elections, but also the background of all kinds of shenanigans in our country, and has written many books on it. And Clint Curtis, who has written a book that focuses on the stolen election in Florida and related matters. And Clint is featured in a movie on the, it's called Murder, Spies, and Voting Lies. And this is an important movie and relevant to what happened in Ohio in 2004, because there are more than one person who's seen similarities between the assassination of Ray Lemmy, who is the person who was interviewing Clint Curtis 2 weeks before he was found suicided in a Georgia motel room, and the situation with Mike Connell, who was probably brought down in a small airplane crash on December 19, 2008. Mike Connell being the guy that knew from the inside how elections have been stolen in this country for this decade and even earlier. So without further ado, take it away, Bob and Clint.
We're also very lucky if the panelists could come in. John Quigley, who I consider one of the foremost authorities in the world on human rights, will be here speaking to the key question of whether or not Bush and Cheney should be indicted as international war criminals or violators of human rights, and Anita Rios, who's with the Green Party, which will give the Green Party perspective, which usually the third parties, Libertarian, Greens, and others tend to talk a little more bluntly in this society than does the mainstream. So the general theme of the panel, and we'll be taking, we have live mics up here, but also the audience will be taking questions. I'm going to give each of the participants about 6 to 8 minutes to outline their concerns, and then we'll be interacting with any questions that you have. So the wide range of human rights violations that often don't get discussed in the mainstream media. Let me begin by having Professor John Quigley of the Moritz College of Law outline at least what he thinks are the elements of the case against Bush and Cheney. Then we'll go to Anita Rios for the Green Party perspective, and then we'll go to Clint Curtis for his views as an insider on elections and whether or not these systems can be manipulated. And I know he's got his computer with you with the program that he actually wrote to rig elections. Of course, officially in the mainstream media, that can't be done. So Professor Quigley.
Thank you, Bob. You know, the question of prosecuting those who were responsible for torture is one that it has a couple of aspects. I mean, one is whether it can be done legally and whether it should be done legally. The other is the broader question of what impact that might have on our relations with the rest of the world. President Obama gave a very highly publicized speech in Cairo not too long ago, where he talked about improving our relations with the Arab world, with the Muslim world. He didn't talk about the torture business, and of course the victims of the torture were people from that area. This is probably one thing he could do that would be a little bit more concrete than just, you know, what he said in that speech. at redressing some of the problems that we have with that part of the world. As to whether it can or should be done, the short answer, I suppose, is that we do have in this country a treaty that the United States has become party to about torture, that defines torture and that says that when it's occurred you have to deal with it, you have to prosecute. That's one of the basic obligations that countries have with regard to human rights of a serious, human rights violations of a serious nature, and in particular torture. That is, that they have to prosecute. And here we have rather substantial evidence that there has been torture committed, yet nothing is being done to bring the perpetrators to justice. There have been a lot of investigations that have dealt with it in other ways, and through the House Armed Services Committee, there are investigations going on in the Justice Department as to whether the lawyers who gave the officials at the top of government a legal opinion as to what did or did not constitute torture. There are investigations going on as to whether or not they could possibly have done that in good faith, and whether there should be some kind of discipline of those people. So we've got these investigations going on, you might say at the margins, but there isn't anything at the moment that seems to be leading in the direction of criminal prosecution. There is a federal statute that implements the Torture Convention that provides for the possibility of an actual prosecution. And that law is fairly new. It's actually been implemented once, not against officials of the U.S. government, but against a former official of the government of Liberia. There was a prosecution in Miami now about a year ago against a fellow who was very high up in the executive branch of government in Liberia during the Civil War, committed torture, not himself, but he organized a lot of torture. He then came to this country, and he was arrested in Miami and actually prosecuted. He's now serving a very long prison sentence in a federal prison for violation of this federal statute against torture. So there is a statute on the books. It has been tested and used, and there's no real reason that it couldn't be used against the officials of the Bush administration, who rather clearly were involved in the business of torture. Some of the information leading in that direction has already come out. Information suggesting that the people who perpetrated the worst kind of torture, the waterboarding that was done against a number of people, that the people who actually did that on behalf of the U.S. government were not all that excited about doing it, but that they were being pressured to do it by higher-ups, that the torture was being monitored, or that you might say the interrogations were being monitored very carefully by the Justice Department and the Defense Department, and the decisions about torture, not only setting the general policy for it, but deciding to use it against particular individuals on particular days, that those decisions were made at rather high levels of government. So if we did have a prosecution, a lot of that evidence could come out. Another way in which it conceivably could be handled is what has been referred to as truth commissions, which could be done on the basis of not prosecuting, but of getting out as much information as possible. And that's something that has been thrown around in Congress as a possibility. And I think Congress and the President are more likely to go that way than they are with prosecutions. But even that is still only in the talk stage. I think perhaps I should stop there, and we can get on to these other important issues and then get into discussion.
Thank you, Professor Quigley. Anita Rios, the Green Party candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Ohio and a long-standing activist among the Greens, will talk about a Green perspective on the indictments of Bush and Cheney.
Hello, everybody. As Bob said, my name is Anita Rios, and I wanted to maybe put myself in context a little bit better. Yes, I'm a longtime Green activist, and it's my plan to continue to do that as well here in Ohio, because I feel that is a very necessary part of making change in our societies, to not capitulate our political power. And to really make we the people, not some of the people who control all of the money, also controlling all of the political power all of the time. So I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I come from Toledo, Ohio. I'm a longtime activist. I currently hold the position of being the president of the Toledo chapter of the National Organization for Women. I also am a part-time worker at an abortion clinic in Toledo. So I've organized rallies against the Davis-Besse nuclear power plant up in Toledo. So there's lots of things that I've sort of stuck my fingers in, just, you know, maybe trying to plug that dam that we all see all those leaks in. But in any case, when Bob asked me to speak about torture, you know, I always talk about everything from the point of view of me working in my kitchen, you know, and sort of being a mom, being just an ordinary person, and how does this affect me, and what does this mean? And I started thinking about torture and all its many ramifications, and, you know, certainly we can imagine the torture as it's taking place in those modern dungeons that we've developed throughout the world, those secret places where we take the people that we've decided are our enemies and we stick them in places where nobody knows they're at, and where they're hidden away, and we can all live our comfortable lives and have our celebrations and just pretend that it's just not happening. So I was thinking about those folks, and they seem so very far away, and it seems like it's easy to ignore that when it is so very far away. And then I was thinking about what that does, you know, because somebody who lives among us is the person who did the waterboarding, and they will come back and be among us. And we know, as we have seen every time we have a war, every time we send our young people to do heinous things to other people, they come back and they do those heinous things to us too. And, you know, certainly our young people are victims and they're perpetrators too. So what is the solution when it comes to reducing the pollution that has been created on a personal level when we make torturers out of the people who swore to protect our country? And I'm sure many of those people did that in good conscience, feeling like they were stepping forward to protect all of us, to protect our way of life. And although I feel that was a very misguided way, and it continues to be a very misguided way to keep us safe, and that until we figure out a better way for resolving our differences with other countries and with other peoples, that we will continue to be stuck in an us versus them mentality that poisons everything we do as a society. And I say that from the standpoint of being a brown person in this society, and I certainly very often feel that us versus them mentality poisons everything that we do, that we never get away from it. It's so easy for us to dislike that person that is not like us, to turn a blind eye to what we are or our government is doing to those people. So as I think about what is the resolution to that issue, certainly we have to get to the bottom of what happened in the Bush administration. We can't fix it unless we know what it is, and we can't change it unless we know how far it goes into our military, into our FBI, into the CIA. Until we know exactly what happened, we can't fix it. So I think it's a no-brainer that we prosecute. However, also understanding that our criminal justice system is profoundly flawed, I would say that that is a somewhat shallow approach to the damage that has been done in allowing our country to undertake torture on our behalf. How much time do I have here? Okay, so, and the truth commissions, I feel, are a very valuable thing, because I think that there is healing that needs to take place, not just among the people who were tortured, but also among the torturers, because they were victimized too. Probably very often they were people who were in a situation where they were following orders. And what do we do with that? And how do we bring them back into society and give them the kind of healing that they need to be a part of our society? And the last thing I would say about the whole torture notion is that on a daily basis, torture is undertaken, not in those dungeons, in those prisons, in those places that we know nothing about in other countries, but here, in our name, in our own communities, because one, the criminal justice system employs many of those same practices that we employed over there, they employ it over here. And two, the hubris and the lack of compassion that is necessary for someone to torture another person is endemic, and it's institutionalized in our criminal justice system. So I think that when we think about torture, we have to think about what is going to keep our entire community safe. And we have to, one, attack the notion of us versus them. We need to put that away. We need to put that aside. We need to understand that either we heal this earth for all of us, or we're all at risk, and we continue to be at risk. And lastly, I would say that as a woman, I think about the fact that every single day, some woman is tortured, is murdered, is beaten, is abused by somebody in her life who is supposed to love her. Because most women in this society are murdered by somebody that is either their boyfriend or their spouse or something like that. And to me, that's torture too. That's kind of the silent torture that takes place in our society every single day. And I want us to pay attention to that too. So as we engage in this political movement to attack Bush and Cheney and that administration, we have to remember that we've never been innocent, and our society is filled with that pollution that we all need to take responsibility for, and we all need to do something about. So that's that.
All right, thank you, Anita Rios. Finally, it's my privilege to introduce Clint Curtis, who will tell you a little about his story, but the range of reforms we need to deal with are not only the question of holding people accountable for torture and applying the rule of law, but creating transparencies in our election. And one of the great issues, Confucius once said, societies never change until they talk frankly about what the problem is. And Clint Curtis found out one of the huge problems in the voting process, and I'll let him explain his story. But I encourage you, if you get a chance, to buy or view the video, Murder, Spies, and Voting Lies. Clint Curtis.
Hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Clint Curtis, and basically I'm just a geek, just a programmer. And what occurred back in, is it too loud?
It's a conspiracy!
Is this better? I just used the wrong one. Anyway, I'm a computer programmer, and back in 2000, I was working in Oviedo, Florida for a company, and our head lobbyist, chief of staff, person coming in being the Speaker of the Florida House and running mate of Jeb Bush, Tom Feeney, was the person that basically fed contracts to the company, because in Florida that's how you do contracts. And essentially what occurred was he came in, I was the head programmer, and he requested a program which would allow someone to walk up, touch a screen, and basically decide how the election was going to turn out. Didn't matter what the real votes were. He wanted some sort of touchscreen button you could hit in a certain pattern, and you could decide who won. Easy to do, right? So I assumed, being a Republican, he was a Republican, that he was the good guy, because at that time, you know, if you're a Republican, they're good guys, you're good guys, everybody's happy. So I built a program and the information on what you need to basically stop that from happening. Because my assumption was, well, if you're going to have a vote fraud program, because you're bringing in electronic machines, you're obviously looking at how to prevent people from cheating. So I wrote that, I wrote the steps, and the steps are pretty easy. You just have to make sure that, you know, it's a paper ballot or it generates something that's away from the programmer, because as long as the programmer can touch it, like the little receipt things they have on the side, worthless. I can roll those back, I can rewrite them, I can blank them out. As long as they are touching the computer, I control them. So the key is you have to get the paper away from the programmer. You have to do an audit on it, because the total I give you is whatever I decide, not what is on the paper. So you have to do an audit and you have to check it. And basically that's all you have to do. It's very simple, very straightforward. It's basically the way every business conducts business, is you have external auditors auditing your files to make sure everything's legit. The head of the company informed me that this was not to stop vote fraud, this was actually to build machines which could flip votes in South Florida. Now, I'm assuming they can't pull that off, because who's going to let a private company build a machine that judges an election and no one can check it? But that's what we have. I think that's what you still have here in Ohio, in fact. So this is the problem. I went before Congress, I testified to them, I showed them how it works. You just walk up. Doesn't matter what the actual vote totals are, you hit the buttons in the right order, and it immediately selects whoever you want to win to have 51% of the vote, and the other guy has 49. And that's the way it is. You change all of your logs, you can't check it. If you run an accuracy test at the Supervisor of Elections office, they can run it all day long, and it'll look perfect. Because essentially, it should add 1 every time you vote. And you can make it do that. In fact, you should make it do that, because you want it to count correctly, unless you don't. And when you don't, you hit the buttons in the right order, it flips, and there it goes. So that's essentially what I built, that's what I reported. In 40 states now, we have it so that you have to have paper, and we're still fighting for the audits, because they're still, you know, stopping that. But essentially we're getting verification in 40 states. Ohio isn't one of them, so you need to put pressure on people to make sure your vote counts. Because right now, the machine is the one that votes and you don't. And the machine votes any way it's told to vote. So whoever controls the machine controls the vote, and you are wasting your time.
All right, Clint Curtis, we're going to take some questions now. I think Clint's going to get out his computer, so those of you at the end, we'll invite you up and you can see the actual vote flip, how easy it is to do. Any questions from anyone in the audience? Come on up and grab the mic here. I don't know how far it's going to stretch.
Clint, I think I remember you ran for Congress, correct?
Correct.
Did you run as a Democrat or Republican?
Democrat.
Democrat. And then you lost the election?
Right.
Okay, did you go door to door and actually survey all the voters that had voted and asked them how they voted?
Yes, actually we did that, and it's pretty tough going door to door in Florida, by the way. It's real hot. But essentially what happened is we were running in a race against the very guy that asked for the vote flip. He became a congressman right after that. Designed his own district, and somehow got elected, amazingly. So, yeah, who would have thought? So he got elected. I ran against him the next time, and basically we had a Zogby poll that went out nationally. It showed that we were neck and neck, which means we were losing by 3 points or winning by 3 points. You never know where. So if I'd lost by 3 or 4%, nothing I could do, no way to check it. But in final results, we lost by 12. And that was enough to allow me to go door to door in precincts, you know, that had more Democrats than Republicans, but somehow he won the precinct anyway. And so we checked them, they actually signed affidavits and told us how they voted, and we found that in 12 precincts, every precinct we walked, we had 12 to 24% more votes than what the election gave us. So we took the affidavits, we took the information, we gave it to Congress, Democratic Congress, controlled by a Democratic head, and they decided to do nothing. But what we did get in Florida was we got the voting machines kicked out, and they went back to a paper machine, and so we had some success even though we didn't get the election.
I was very interested to hear the issue or your contention about the hardware being a point at which you can control the outcome of an election. I'm kind of more interested in the software side, and what I'd like to hear you discuss is the issue of open source counting software.
Well, of course, open source is a good idea, but it depends. Even with open source, you still have to rely on geeks to check it for you. Because even though open source is open, that doesn't mean that most of the people actually can read it. It's still pretty encrypted to most people. So what you have to have is, even if you have open source that, you know, a lot of people can look at, you still need to do that audit where you're checking the paper against the results of the machine. Now, if you have the paper ballot and if you run it through optical scan, that doesn't cure anything, because optical scan, the scanner and the machine that counts it, is a computer. It's just counting the pixels, is what it's counting. When enough pixels come up black, it says that's a spot that's marked, that's who won. So you need to take that, take a sample. I said 10 to 5% is what everyone has basically said would give you a 90% reliability, and you check it to make sure that your scanner is giving you the right result. If it's giving you the right result, you're golden. If it's not, then basically you just recount the whole thing. In North Carolina, when this thing first started, North Carolina was one of the first ones to pass a bill that was very good. It not only said that we're going to do the audits, we're going to use the scanners, but if the scanners give me a bad result, then the company that sells me the scanners has to pay for the recount. So you know that that's going to count correctly every time, because you're not going to want to have to pay money to have it recounted by hand. So, you know, that's a good way to do it.
All right. Other questions? Looks like we got 2 people here.
Thank you all for coming here. I guess with both issues, with both the torture and the elections, and I want you to address, any one of you to address this, or all of you, is it seems like there's an underlying problem of indifference. And I've been involved with things for a while, people know me, and I don't see it changing. I wish it were. I think there's a little bit less indifference with torture. You do read something about that in the media and other things. But particularly, I've seen all the work that Bob's done in elections, and now what you're saying and all that. And regrettably, it doesn't seem to be getting through. It doesn't seem to be hitting home. I'm not saying it's our fault. I don't know what's wrong. I mean, I've read other books on opinion influence. I know that, you know, there's certain powerful conservative influences that are kind of governing the whole metaphorical perspective. But anyways, if any of you have any feedback on that, have thought about it, I'd like to hear your feedback.
I'll take it first. It seems like we're losing, but we're not. When this thing first started in 2004, there were only about 10 states left that weren't committed to going to DREs. These machines that would basically eat your vote. 10, that was all left, and they were being pushed to take them. So now the trend has reversed, I mean, this thing came out of Florida, and Florida was one of the first states to flip that over and say, okay, we give up. You know, we're going to get congressional challenges, we're going to get all this bad publicity, and it may be a handful of people that actually do most of the work, but the rest of the world listens. Occasionally it's a blur, you know. When I was walking around door to door collecting those affidavits, everyone had heard about it. Everyone. And everyone believed that the machines didn't count right. Now, we can't verify that my program went into the final machine. But you do know that it can be done, and you do know that it doesn't feel right, and that's enough. And so, unless you can test the verification of your system, you have no confidence in it, and that's what they're faced, and that's why now there's 40 states, there's more going to it. We just have to keep pushing. It's kind of like rowing upstream, but, you know, occasionally we catch breeze and we do okay. So, I think we're winning, it just doesn't seem like it sometimes.
John and Anita, is like the voting issue, which says we're winning on the torture issue. Are we going to deal with it, or is it just too big and too painful? Where do you think it's really headed?
Yeah, well, I don't see the new administration really dealing with it in the sense of dealing with the torture that has previously occurred. With respect to present policy, I think there's more chance that there's going to be a change. That is, that they're not going to be doing what the Bush administration did, at least for now. Although the torture is really part of a broader foreign policy kind of issue, and that is our relations with the whole section of the world and whether we're going to be conducting wars there. And on that, I'm less sure that we're going to see much of a change, because we do seem to be pursuing the war in Afghanistan, even though most of the NATO allies are of the opinion that it's not worth doing and that it's not going to be pursued successfully. You know, on that score, I think we may simply be seeing a continuation.
Well, are we winning or losing? I think that remains to be seen. And I do think we have a teachable moment. And with every election, in particular with the issues of how we conduct those elections, with every election we have a teachable moment. And when, you know, I had the honor of running with Bob Fitrakis I was his lieutenant governor running mate, and I spent a lot of time out in communities here in Ohio, and it's hard to go door to door here too because it's cold. And so I talked to a lot of people. I personally gathered about 1,000 signatures for our petitions, and one thing I kept hearing in many different ways was, why should I bother? It's not going to matter anyway. Why should I bother? In particular, because this was right after the 2004 election was stolen. And so we were pushing that issue. We were pushing that. I sued Ken Blackwell. And so in the context of that, people were telling me, so if you're right, why should I bother? Because they're just going to steal it anyway. And, you know, that I really racked my brains on that, because I think that's a real question. And, but there was something fundamentally wrong with that approach. Okay, they stole it, I won't bother. And then it occurred to me, it's sort of like when you're being robbed, okay? If you're in your house and somebody breaks into your house and steals some of your stuff, do you then allow them to just come in at will and steal your stuff and stop bothering to lock your doors, stop bothering to care about it? You don't. And that is exactly what is at stake when our elections are stolen. That's our property, that's our stuff, and it's being stolen. And every time it gets stolen, that doesn't mean we get to walk away from the ballot box and walk away from the political process. That means we work harder. And, you know, are we going to win or are we going to lose? I don't know, but what I have to do doesn't change. I I have to keep trying and I have to keep fighting. And I hope you guys do too. And I hope you remember one thing. This happens at lots of different levels. There's always something you can do at home in your own community. Sometimes it feels like there's nothing that's changing, but there's lots of little good that happens every day that you can contribute towards.
And this is one of the key differences right now. There's no transparency in Iran. We don't know what the election results were, but those people are fighting for democracy. We, on a very basic level, were betrayed in 2000 when Al Gore did not fight because he actually won that election when all the votes were counted. That leadership betrayed us to stay viable. He wasn't viable because he didn't fight for democracy. John Kerry gave in as well. One of the things about the Obama campaign, which, again, I'm talking here as a Green, is that they actually fought. When 1 million people were purged from the voting rolls, they actually went up and signed them back up. I remember after the election with John Kerry, after he conceded, John Kerry, in many ways, down in Brazil, we got the word from Greg Moore, the NAACP, asked him about a free press report. Did they really purge 300,000 voters in Ohio?
Yes!
Yes, they did. And this time they purged 3 times as many. But people on the grassroots level, some of them prosecuted by the Bush administration, went out and signed people up. And that's why the people in Iran, above all else, are actually fighting for democracy. We will only win if we fight for democracy.
I have a question. In the primaries for the President of the United States, I voted for a political party and I wrote a write-in comment. I knew that this was going on ahead of time, and I purposely did this. Within a minute of my write-in for this cartoon character, I had a cell phone call from a political party who I had met at the VA facility who wanted me to switch my vote at that time in the voting booth. Now this is on cell phone records, and I told that person, you didn't have the time of day for me at the VA, and I don't have the time to switch my vote at this time. Are those cell phone records submissible in court?
Yeah, I think John and I agree. Look, if it sounds like somebody violated the Australian ballot in secrecy. If in any way you had evidence that they looked at that piece of paper, I think their call to you, of course, would be admissible evidence. Now, the broader question, I mean, there's a lot of admissible evidence that needs to be brought in from 2004, but part of the problem in creating transparency in a paper record, if somebody is then mining that record to violate your right to vote privately, then to me that's criminal activity, and that would be admissible evidence. Other questions? We still got the mic out there. Are there other questions, comments on the Bush administration? Can we get a mic over here? Sure. Again, should Bush and Cheney be indicted? Should there be a truth commission? Okay, we saw that one election, close to unanimous.
This is probably not the question you want to hear, but I'm just saying, we have to dump this governor, this failed governor, Governor Strickland. I don't think he's winnable against Kasich. I wouldn't want to vote for him again anyway. He is Hoover-esque in his policies. He's just running the state into the ground. I think we have to have a concerted effort among Democrats or whatever, liberal people, open-minded people who thinking people, to dump this governor before it becomes a fait accompli that he becomes the Democratic nominee again. Your comments, please.
Well, we're kind of a non-profit sponsor here, but let me just say that the governor probably hurt herself tremendously with the endorsement of the nukes and Pike and Harvey Wasserman and Harvey, I think, is one of the foremost experts on the planet. The question to us is, first of all, I don't think the plant is ever going to open. It's going to be like the Zimmer plant. We're going to spend $10 to $15 billion for 4,000 jobs, when if we took that same money and bought these shingles with embedded solar panels, we could re-shingle the entire state of Ohio and produce our electricity for our own homes, as the house does right there north of Broad, where there is a house already with solar shingles. So I think there's going to be a lot of issues at the grassroots level. I mean, another question we've raised in our writings is, why did the Obama plan look pretty much like the Bush plan? The largest welfare check in the world to the bankers. Why didn't that money go to the local level, to the co-ops and to the credit unions, where I can elect my own board, and that money come back into our community instead of going into the few entities that looted the system in the first place? These issues, unless we talk about them in the campaign and hold the gubernatorial candidates responsible, there's going to be no real debate on the pressing issues like torture. Torture should be a campaign issue. This is the United States. I grew up with only evil Soviets and bad people and fascist torture. Since when does the United States of America openly and blatantly engage in torture and then try to redefine it by saying, well, no major body organs failed? Torture is torture. We passed the Covenant Against Torture. We set these standards. These are American values. We have the 8th Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment. Bush and Cheney need to go to jail. And it's up to us as a people to make sure that that happens. I'll ask all the panel members to sum up. We have 5 minutes left. Your last thoughts.
Okay, there's lots of work to do, and you know, the thing is that if you don't want Strickland, which frankly I didn't vote for him, I voted for that man, but if you don't want Strickland, then we all have to work hard to put forward an alternative to Strickland, and that's just the bottom line. And those campaigns are hard, they're a lot of work, they take money. We have a website. Green Party of Ohio has a website. Check it out. You know, we're always looking for volunteers.
Just one little more point on the torture thing, and that is that the torture that's been committed by the Bush administration officials is getting attention in other countries. There's a possibility that some of these people actually are going to get prosecuted in some European countries, and this is going to put more pressure on the United States to do something about it.
Well, I obviously think that the torture issue should be addressed, and there should be investigations and accountability all across the board, not just on this, but on all the other, you know, violation of the wiretapping, everything else. We should look at it very carefully, and we should actually investigate it and make sure it doesn't happen again. But the key is we have to keep working, because while it may not seem like we're winning all the time, we have made a whole lot more progress than we should have. And that's where it is.
All right, I thank all of you for coming to the Free Press Forum. Check out thefreepress.org. These alternatives, indie media, free press, going to become more important because rightfully the mainstream media is failing. And I believe above all else their failure is rooted in their abysmal reporting. The people need to become the media. Be the media. Check out freepress.org. Thank you for your time. If you want to see how to rig an election, Clint Curtis will show you the program that he wrote. Thank you for coming.
Let's hear it for the Free Press and Green Party. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Anita and Marty. Don't go away. We have Miller Pelton coming.